Well then, we are back with more understandings from the Renewed Covenant from the Aramaic English translation of the Word. This translation is from the original manuscripts of the prophets of Yahweh, the prophets of old, from the time of Israel, related with the Revelation, the 8th chapter, gives us then a pre-gap time of what then is coming in the future. Revelation, it's a very unique manuscript because it relates with many layers of the previous covenant. In fact, you can trace back the entire Revelation from before the time of the Messiah. Very interestingly, so then you can understand the entire section of it only by reading the prophets. As obviously a person would understand, because the Messiah came as the prophet, he was from the lineage of the prophets, and prior of the work of the Messiah, then the prophecies were already laid. So then the people would understand that the Messiah then, as he came, then he completed what the prophets already had spoken of him. So understanding the future then gives us from the creation of the world until the very starting of Revelation, those are absolutely layered. You can count from 12 to 20 plus layers before the starting Revelation. And what you think is so complex, in fact, is extremely simple as long as you understand the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, and then you understand how to read them. So then, when Yohanan was at the site of the holy city during his time, he had the entire understanding of the scripture perfectly placed in layers of times and seasons. As it was discovered layered by layer, then he would pile those Megillas as per order of the times and seasons. So the Torah, as you understand today, is this big, huge animal skin with writings on it and then sewn together. Those were not so back in the old days. Those were separated by sometimes authors and sometimes by layers of understanding. Mostly by authors because it was related with the prophets of the time, but the real understanding of the divine scripture is by times and seasons. Because then, as the Creator has made the sun and the lunar view, so determines then the day and the month, and then the barley aviv, then the year. So then times and seasons, for the counting of times and the seasons. If you read then Genesis, you begin to understand. So the whole concept of prophecy became known as then seasons of time. And those were mostly related then with the feasts, because those were related with a certain time of the year where special information then was given. So when you begin then to read Revelation, then you'll find the multi-layer is then working with each other. So this world of confusion that we are in at the moment, then we can understand from Daniel, many people would go to and fro. And when Daniel speaks of to and fro, means confusion. Always in the scripture you find to and fro meaning of confusion. However, then knowledge would increase and then people would go to and fro. This to and fro then is resolved when the gap then is in place from Yermiyahu, the 24th chapter, from the 6th verse and the 7th verse, then you'll find the gap. So then when you read Daniel, the layer is stating, and then knowledge would increase and people would go to and fro. After the going to and fro, then you can understand Yermiyahu, the 24th chapter, 6th and 7th. Then you read Yermiyahu, 61st chapter, then the rebuilding. So those tri-layers are then related. Then you can also read Zechariah the 12th chapter and then Ezekiel. You find then certain portions of the time in the season related with the prophecy you find in the linkage. And at the moment we should be striving for peace around the world because wars are prohibited. Because the time is then time of rebuilding. And then the last 1,000 years expired in 2009 or 6009. When the expiration meant then religion and then rulership of the Gentiles then absolutely separated. Because whatsoever we had then the mixing of religion with the Gentile ruling then has ended. That's why then the Creator has decided to take a religion absolutely away from the main stream of mixing religion with trade. So then he began to make a distinction what those are. Absolutely pure trade outside of religion. Though China, they have their own religion, but they don't mix with trade. Maintains purely trade. So then 6009 had ended then the mixing of religion with trade. That's why there is a transitional time back to the truth, but then it's done in two parts. The first part is done then via the rulership as it was established during the time when the Messiah spoke with the Samaritans. The Messiah gave them a couple of days, meant 2,000 years to do the ruling. Okay, so then you have the first 1,000 was then his people were giving directives from heaven. The other 1,000 then Satan tried and didn't work, and in 6009. And then we are returning to the trade of the Gentiles, purely then trade. No religion mixed with it. So the gap from the previous 1,000, it is permanently open. That's why there is no more link with what they think is divine with the trade. Those are separated. And then during this time of great prosperity coming, for a time, must return the holy cities, so then they can receive directives. So you have then the truth, absolutely true, found in the holy cities. Then you have nations yet with the option of consulting other areas, yet they have the availability of the real truth. So then, understanding the end of time trade, then you begin to relate. During the time of Daniel, for instance, he was then a spokesperson for the king. He used to make deals with the nations, and he was a statesperson, because this is the work of a statesperson. Making deals with other nations. Because he did speak many languages, and he had a very important role during his time of a political position, because he did understand the times and seasons. So then when the political people of his time would make decisions, obviously they would consult with Daniel, because Daniel did understand the times and seasons. It's a normal factor, because he already had given the king many years earlier then the entire history from his time until the end. And then obviously when the statue of gold was put in place and obviously didn't work, because there was no distinction then from what they were doing previously, then people began to consult him. It's very obvious. Only much later when the other king had taken over, the son of Babylonian king, then he made that heck out of it. Became a mockery. The writing on a plaster, for instance, they were over there drinking and having some fun, and then it was the time then when the other king had come and had taken over. Cyrus. So then you begin to understand the steps of formation. But Daniel was very prominent during his time, and he used to make deals for the kingdom. Because the main understanding back in the old days was then the relationship with trade and spirit. Not very much used these days. Most of the people, they do purely trade and they take the risks. Back in the old times, they had to take into consideration first then the spiritual world involved with the trade, and Daniel was the top person. So he was consulted. And then at the end of time, we understand Revelation chapter 8 gives us then the leadership of the trades market in a very secular understanding. So then we can understand, can link the time of China, for instance, with the time of Daniel. Purely trade. Then we understand then the spiritual situation going on. The holy cities returning as they used to be very popular during the time of Yohanan. However, the nations, they are at liberty to take other turns if they decide, but then the market is going to stabilize the situation. So it's a very nicely planned. Only the Creator could do this, because those are already delineated in the Scripture. The situation going on around the world is people do not understand in layers, neither in times and seasons. That's the most important problem. When people begin to understand times and seasons and understand then the holy language, then they begin to understand the events, or then the steps of formation of those events. So at the moment it is most required for the Chinese then to start doing patrols. It is absolutely vital. Because when the Chinese, they start doing patrols, then we can retrieve. Because the United States system is not going to be implemented. Our part in the world's history as then pacifiers during the time of the Second World War, those times are gone. We have done our duty. Then takes over then another country with a specialized system in order to control and then making sure the market then is stable. As most of Daniel's time of statesperson, it was very stable. Though the king made the statue of gold, didn't work, but then trade continued. And during the time of Daniel was very stable. So the Chinese then, they're going to take over the markets of the world, of the most bulk of the market, and then the other nations, they're going to rebuild. And then the cities are returning in order to give directives to those nations. That's why the cities are so important. During the time of Yohanan, there was a great prosperity going on around the world. However, they had to have those holy cities to give them directives. Because when those people, they begin to prosper so much without a heaven's directive, then they destroy each other. They must have those directives in those holy places, holy cities, so then the people, when they begin to understand that their thoughts are evil, then they go over there to the holy city and they request and they receive an answer. So then the holy cities are utmost important because they maintain the stability of the spiritual world. Otherwise the nations, they destroy each other as we are destroying each other. If we wouldn't have this holy plan, our country would go and try then to establish another system of policies, and we would ruin ourselves, we would ruin the world, and we would destroy each other. That's why the plan in advance is extremely important, so then we know what's taking place. So then Yermiyahu, the 61st chapter, gives us then a time of rebuilding, the cities returning, Chinese taking over the market to stabilize the world's system, and then the cities, they give the nations directives. As far as your preference of religion, you're going to be so busy during the next few years, you would probably not even have time for religion, honestly. Wisely so, if you would have then a copy of the Torah from the time of Yohanan and begin to study the scriptures that way, so then you can understand times and seasons, it would be the most wise, but you have the choice to do your own religion. But it's very evident of the leadership of the world's market. The United States is not going to be the leader of the world's market. So from the time where then we are experiencing the first steps of these rebuilding time or restoration time, so why then are we going to try to have these policies then placed around the world if it's going to work against us? Where do you find the most concentration of ships? You find in Asia, because Shaliach Shaul was the first time when they had the dispensation of Ruach HaKodesh given to his people. That's where he went, in Asia. So then at the end, the market of Asia then is the most powerful, and China is the leader of it. So do you think our foreign policies then they're going to work? No, they're outdated. The whole plan of the end of time is only waiting for us to retrieve. And as the time goes on and we don't retrieve, then it'll work against us. That's why no nation can control the holy prophecies. Because when the time comes, it comes and it must be then completed. We already don't have any economy to compete with the world's market. Our manufacture is nearly inexistent. We can't compete with China. We are heavily indebted. We can't produce anymore, and we are spending more than we can produce. So what do you think? It's only the time. It's already said. IMF already gave their opinion. 40 years is the maximum of our monetary system can hold. And then the market crashes. So the fact is not holding back until the last minute, is then evaluating the destruction of our economy when the time comes, because then not only we have then to retrieve forcibly, but then we have to work twice as much to get repaired, whereas if we were 4 years in advance, we would say, why didn't we retrieve earlier? So this is the time precisely to retrieve, so we can rebuild. Read the scripture. What do you think rebuilding is? Can we produce more than we spend? No, we are reversed. We are spending more than we are producing. It's going to come a time where the economy is going to crash. So if a person doesn't understand this fact, either a person is retarded, or a person doesn't understand for other reasons that we don't know what. But understanding the market and the printing out of money versus the market, 40 years is the very maximum. And then the economy crashes. So then why wait until the next 40 years then doing double of the work, whereas we can retrieve earlier? Because China is already showing signs of unrest, showing that they must expand. It's the perfect time for them to expand and then production must increase. And then in the Middle East, they're going to start ordering products from China to get their countries rebuilt. And then shortly after, then their computerized system would be available. And the reason why China is waiting for our market to crash is because they don't want to be interfered with. It's very obvious. Because we, in the United States, we have a tendency to try to control the world's market, though we don't have barely any market to control ourselves. So the only alternative for China is let the system go until it breaks. Not only this, but at the end we may face the revolution, civil war. Because then the people with the money are going to hoard it up, the others don't have any jobs, then the economy busted, broken, ends up in anarchy. But those are later factors, but the point is, a country is spending more than every country is producing. At some point it breaks. And IMF already gave 40 years the very maximum. So let's try to read the scripture as per times and seasons, and then instruct other people also, because the time is very critical. Stay tuned.